Good morning. Starting a new series called Darkside Opinions? Yeah, sure. I'm going to talk about Star Wars incessantly. So to kick it off, I'm going to rank every Star Wars movie that I've seen, which I think is most of them. Just remember, this is all my opinion. Oh, and there will be spoilers for some of these movies. However, you've probably already seen the ones that are worth watching. So at the bottom of my list, I have The Phantom, Caravan of Courage. Not many people have seen the Ewok. I suppose they're prequels, and I have to say they're not missing out. Caravan of Courage has bad acting, lines, and seems to be particularly focused on marketing toys. Also has a pretty random and weird story, which would be fine if I was interested in anything other than how dangerous the moon of Endor is. Some of the action's alright, but I do wish I had just watched the sequel. Now comes the ultimate letdown in Star Wars history, The Phantom Menace. Officially give this movie the title of worst acting in all of Star Wars, likely due to some really bad direction on Mr. Lucas's part. Lots of people have complained about this movie, and while I do think that there's some good ideas, it just ends up being a boring movie with some interesting action now and again. Next on my list, we have Battle for Endor, the sequel to Caravan of Courage. It actually improved over the original. It has a more focused story, better action, and they at least attempted having emotional moments. It still probably just exists to sell merchandise, but it at least captures the Star Wars feel well enough for me to put it above Episode 1. I put Force Awakens below Attack of the Clones. I may be kind of harsh, but it's still bad. There were a lot of reasons that made me put it here. One thing I will say, however, is I think Episode 7 is a better movie than the prequels. I just think it isn't a better Star Wars movie. Starting off, the characters are handled badly. Poe Dameron, who destroys the First Order's Death Star, gets about as much development and screen time as Uncle Owen from A New Hope. Finn has the same problem. He leaves the First Order in the third scene we see him in, and the only reason we're given is because he doesn't like fighting? Then there's Rey, who, as I will always say, would be an interesting character if they weren't so obsessed with keeping everything about her a mystery, making her way too strong in the Force. I'm fine with her being able to fight alright with a lightsaber and even how she tapped into Kylo's fears. But using the Jedi mind trick and having greater telekinetic powers than a trained Force user are not entry-level skills. Which brings me to Kylo, who could have been the most compelling villain in Star Wars, with the story of how he had to murder his own father, if we knew why he was on the dark side. Most we get is that Snoke, who's such an annoying mess that I can't talk about him here, turned him to the dark side somehow, and he's afraid of being weak, I think. That's just a theory. What we end up with is a not threatening Darth Vader who stays evil because he's guilty? I don't know. Tell me if you think you know. This movie also drags itself down by trying to capture the feeling of the other originals by taking plot elements from them, which doesn't help with a movie that already can't stand up on its own 2 feet. I would talk about the movie more, but I don't have the time, so I'll just leave it at that. Attack of the Clones gets the award for the worst lines in Star Wars. I don't like sand. It's rough and coarse, and it gets everywhere. Everywhere. Unlike here. Everything here is soft and smooth. Some actors like Ewan McGregor do manage to pull some of their lines off, but anyway, the movie also has the badly done politics, romanced, and mostly boring characters from The Phantom Menace, but I do think it makes some significant improvements. There's some interesting action scenes, my favorite Sith Lord in Star Wars, and it at least tries to make those elements I mentioned earlier more bearable. If anything, it's funny to laugh at. Next, we have the Clone Wars movie. I feel basically the same way I do about Attack of the Clones, except with better lines, no politics or romance. I'm a little sad because this is when Disney started the path of turning the EU into Legends, but that deserves its own video. It managed to give us some good insight into the war between droids of flesh and droids of metal. I love Revenge of the Sith. It's so good. Some days I worry the only reason I place it below the originals is because of all the hate the prequels get. But that's neither here and there. Never mind. It's a great ending and a great beginning too. Friend versus friend. light versus dark. A corrupt republic turns into a ruthless empire. The villains and heroes are tricked by the real puppet master. The greatest of heroes turn into tired hermits. The world turns upside down. In my opinion, it isn't the prequel everyone wanted, but it's the prequel A New Hope deserved. A New Hope is the greatest opening in all of Star Wars. A starship flies into the frame, and then we see this massive gray... Wait, that's a starship too? Chasing it. You already feel hopeless in the first few seconds. This must be the Empire that cool title crawl talked about. Then we see this British droid give us some... Are those supposed to be stupid lines? Oh no, they're boarding the ship! And those valiant rebels are gunned down by those skeleton-looking people. And then this thing shows up. It sort of looks like the skeleton guys, but way more imposing with black armor. We're back with the droids again. Oh, I wanted to see more of the battle. You have to appreciate a movie that's first few minutes establish the theme for the rest of the movie. For me, A New Hope's greatest triumph is how it balances the exciting moments that pique your interest and the slow moments to understand the characters. However, I'm awarding this movie second worst lines and acting in all of Star Wars, because most of the lines are just there for comedy or to mention some part of this big world Lucas imagined. Most of them are really unnatural and you can sometimes take you out of the moment. Still, the lines have certain charm to them, actually. The whole movie does. That's why I put it above some other films. Rogue One is one of the most important steps Star Wars has ever taken, and whether or not it's a good idea is still yet to be seen. It is the first Star Wars stepping away from the main episodes to tell a story focusing on something else. Alright, as I mentioned already in the list, they made the Ewok movies. So no, this isn't the first time. In all seriousness, though, Rogue One is the first in what seems to be a long line of movies not focusing on the Skywalkers, I guess, and providing background information on what's happening in the galaxy. And even though some of the characters turn out boring, most of the movie gives you an interesting story on how the mightiest empire in Star Wars was humbled by a bunch of hopefuls with starships. I understand why Empire Strikes Back is a lot of people's favorite Star Wars movie, since it has great interest curve of New Hope, but without the overly long talking and more emotional moments. So why do I put it in second place? Because the whole movie for me, at least, just gets me ready for episode 6, which makes all the struggles in that movie even more meaningful. I'm totally willing to slog through Force Awakens 100 more times to get episode 9. I always seem to really enjoy the last parts of a Star Wars series, and Return of the Jedi is no different. I'm just going to do what I did for Revenge of the Sith. Father vs. Son, hope vs. fear, a last chance to save the galaxy before it turns being ruled by a puppet master who has found how to control a weapon only rivaled by stars. A brother finds his sister. The last masters of the Force fall, leaving a new generation to do what they believe is right for the galaxy. The Ewoks were not one of George's best decisions, but they're as annoying for some people as they are funny for me. This movie wrapped up 6 films and left the door open for a terrible sequel to be made decades later. And hopefully episode 8 will at least be better than Caravan of Courage. That's all for today. I'm not sure if I can write scripts, but that's alright. Next episode, we're probably going to be complaining about New Hope. So, bye.